Greetings. In this video, I'd like to take a look at an interesting claim which has been made by our beloved friend over at the We Woke Now channel, that being DrKelly Richardson. And I'd like to begin with this public Facebook post which you see on your screen, which the good doctor put up in May of last year. And I'll share a link to this post in the video description. I actually list all my sources there, and I ask that viewers regularly check the description sections of my videos, as they usually list the sources relevant to each particular video. Now, as you can see at the bottom of this Facebook post, the good doctor was discussing Acts 13:1. And at the top of the post, he begins as follows, quote, "I'm sure most of you saw the KRS-One videos I've uploaded in regards to the words nəgus, Niger, negro. He used the compact edition of the Oxford English Dictionary as one of his main sources and took screenshots for your review," end quote. And shortly thereafter, with the context being Acts 13:1, the good doctor says that Simeon was called nəgus, among other things. And then his post shared a number of pictures from the dictionary he mentioned, which again is that Oxford English Dictionary. Now, the implication that the good doctor is trying to make here is that if one looked at these entries, one would come away with the conclusion that the name which Simeon has in Acts 13 is synonymous not only with the infamous modern English racial slur, but so too with the Ge'ez and Amharic and Tigrinya word for king, nəgus. Now, of course, the relevant English racial slur is rooted in the ancient Latin term which served as Simeon's name. But I would caution that one should be careful to distinguish between etymology and synonymity. In other words, one word can descend from another without the two being synonymous, right? But that aside, in this video, I'm more interested in focusing on the attempts to connect the Latin term, or its English descendants, with the relevant Ge'ez word for king, nəgus. Now, feel free to pause the video and examine these entries as carefully as possible, as carefully as you'd like, right? Take as much time as you need. See if you can come away with any sense that the relevant dictionary is asserting that that Ge'ez term is related to the English terms on the rest of the screens, right? So the entry for nəgus is up at the top left, and then the rest of the entries, the rest of the screen has the other entries, right? And honestly, I think if anyone honestly looks at this, they're going to come away with the conclusion that the connection is simply not there, right? The Oxford English Dictionary nowhere makes the claim that the Ge'ez term nəgus is somehow connected to, much less synonymous with, the relevant English racial terms, right? And with that in mind, I'd now like to turn to a video that the good doctor put up on YouTube a mere 3 days later. And he presents basically the same argument over the course of nearly an hour and a half. And a little over 40 minutes into that discussion, he mentions that same dictionary, the Oxford English Dictionary, the compact edition, as he says. And he even has someone bring it on stage to show it to the audience. So here, look at this, and fair use.
Right, I'm going to tell you, I got this dictionary right here. That thing is huge, right? Matter of fact, Brother Timon, can you grab it for me? Just put the book inside the case and then bring it out here. This thing is huge. I got this book. I was able to get this book, and I did not realize how big this book is. And the print is so tiny that you literally need a magnifying glass to read it. Come on up. This is the book right here that I'm quoting from. You, sure, so they can see it. What? Just turn it this way. You don't have to take all that. Okay, turn it this way. Right? So that's what you see on the screen is coming directly from this right here. Right? These books look old, right? You know, elders like, man, here comes something else coming in.
Now, as you likely already know from looking closely at the relevant entries, the connection between the Ge'ez word for king, nəgus, and the relevant English terms is nowhere to be found in that dictionary. However, about an hour and 5 minutes into the discussion, the good doctor finally presents a source that does assert that connection. So let's look at that portion. And again, fair use.
Does nəgus mean King of Kings, Lord of Lords? Right? This is a little source here. Some, you'll see here negus, nəgus, niggers, nigga. Still using the word what? Interchangeably.
Okay, at this point, you should be asking, what source was the good doctor employing there? Well, to determine that, let's look a bit more closely at what the screen was displaying. You see, the source is listed there at the bottom of the screen. It was a blog entry from 2012 on the personal blog over at Kamal Al-Adil.com, right? This is not a dictionary. It's not some sort of linguistic source or anything like that. It's not even a blog ran by a linguist, as far as I know. It's just some random blog entry, and with all due respect to the author. And no meaningful attempt is made in that entry to present an argument in favor of a connection between the ge'ez term nəgus and the relevant modern English racial designations, right? It's merely asserted. And I want you to think about the bait and switch that happened here. The good doctor insinuated that support for his position can be found in the Oxford English Dictionary. He even had someone bring the physical dictionary up and show it to the audience. He spent a large amount of time on that, right? Yet he never gets around to showing where that dictionary proposes a connection between the ge'ez term and the relevant English terms. Instead, when it's time to show a source which asserts that connection, he abruptly switches to some random personal blog on the internet. Like I said, that's quite the bait and switch. And this happened again the following month, in June of 2022. You see, he put up another video arguing for this alleged connection, and he even had a picture of the relevant dictionary in the screen tile for the video. So let's go ahead and take a look at a clip from that video. And as you watch this next clip, listen to how he says that Simeon's title was nəgus, and listen to how he even dares people to try to challenge him on that. Fair use.
But I'm going to show you that Simeon was the head nəgus in charge.
What?
Yes. I'm going to show you that Simeon. I'm going to show you Simeon. So anyone, I'm very confident, anyone who want to challenge me on this, anyone that feel like they can come against this, I can knock you down with it. I'm going to prove to you that Simeon, the one that we've been institutionalized, that we've been programmed and wired to call him Niger, when actually his title, right? His title is actually nəgus.
Now, again, I linked to all my sources in the video description, so anyone who's interested in seeing these videos in their entirety can either search using the titles which are shown on the screen, or they can just use the direct links which are listed in the description. Now, in this video too, in this video from June of 2022, like the one from the previous month, the good doctor does the exact same thing. He showed his Oxford dictionary, but when it was time to connect the relevant English racial terms to the ancient ge'ez term, he suddenly resorted to that same personal blog, right? It was the same bait and switch. Here, listen to this wrap up, which comes about an hour and 8 minutes into the video.
Let's wrap this up, family. So does nægus, Nagai, means King of Kings, Lord of Lords? Because that was one of the questions, especially when I shared the KRS-One video. But notice what this says here. Nəgus, nagaste, niggers, nigga. They are all the same word. They are the same word.
They're all the same word. So claims the good doctor. And for support, he cited some random blog making the same assertion. He never shows his Oxford dictionary stating that they're the same word because that dictionary never states such. Hence why he had to just find some random blog on the internet and abruptly switch to that, right? But through nearly 3 hours of video, you know what the good doctor did not do? He never took a look at the ge'ez translation of the relevant verse of Acts 13:1. You know, he often insinuates that he has at least some familiarity with ge'ez. And I myself am merely just an amateur beginning student of the language. But nonetheless, being that the good doctor has some familiarity with ge'ez, which he calls ga'az, shouldn't he have looked at the relevant verse in the ge'ez translation? Honestly, whether the good doctor wishes to insist that Simeon's title was actually nægus, or that his title was some equivalent of nægus, from another language like Hebrew, might that not be reflected in the ge'ez translation of Acts 13:1? Well, since the good doctor didn't show you the verse, we can take a look at it now, right? So this book is titled Wangel, right? Which literally means holy gospel, but it's a ge'ez translation of the entire New Testament, right? It's not just limited to the Gospels. And so now let's jump over to the book of Acts. And that's where we are now, at the start of the book of Acts in the ge'ez translation. But we're going to jump over to the 13th chapter. And this is chapter 13. So let's see how it renders the name of Simeon. The relevant portion reads, Simeon ዘተሰምየ negus. Simeon, which is named Negus. It seems to be little more than a transliteration of the relevant name, right? And this raises a question. Was the good doctor's secret knowledge so esoteric that even the translators of the ge'ez Bible did not know that this verse was referring to Simeon bearing either the title nəgus or, some title that's closely related, a closely related equivalent from another language, right? Did even the translators of the ge'ez Bible not know this? How might the good doctor explain such not being reflected in the ge'ez text of Acts 13, right? And ironically, however, the word nəgus does appear in this verse. It appears when the verse refers to Herodes Negus, King Herod. So even though the translator had an opportunity to call Simeon nəgus, he didn't do so. But in the very same verse, he put that title on Herod, using nəgus, where the Greek text has tetrarch, right? So let's sum up everything we've discussed here. First, Kelly spent months insinuating that the Oxford English Dictionary states that the ge'ez word nəgus was somehow synonymous with the relevant English racial terms, but that assertion is found nowhere in the relevant dictionary. Second, in an attempt at a bait and switch, after spending considerable time making note of the dictionary, Kelly abruptly switched to just some random blog which asserted a connection between the ge'ez term and the relevant English terms. And finally, third, Kelly never bothered to look at the ge'ez translation of Acts 13:1, which does have the word nəgus, but applies it to Herod rather than Simeon. The good doctor is invited to explain why even the translators of the ge'ez Bible missed this alleged connection. And on that note, I'll close this video here. As always, I welcome any comments, questions, or criticisms. Unlike our beloved and gentle friend, our delicate friend over at the We Woke Now channel, I don't censor people here. So feel free to share your thoughts, whether positive or negative. And as always, God bless.